United Against Racism. From Buffalo, we have Brenda Brown, committee member of the Buffalo-Dortmund Sister City Committee. Mayor Brown, who is joining us shortly, Mayor of Buffalo, Dr. Katherine Conway-Turner, President of Buffalo State College, Ronald Dixon, co-founder at Peace, Unity, and Freedom Reform of Buffalo, and Dr. Crystal Rodriguez, Chief of Staff and Chief Diversity Officer at Buffalo State College. From Dortmund, we have joining us Kevin Ndeme Matuke, Chair of the African Network of Germany, also known as TANG. This is in the state of North Rhine-Westphalia, where Dortmund is also located. He is also a member of the Council on Integration for the City of Dortmund. Also joining us is Dr. Rosalyn Dressman, Executive Director of African Tide Union of the Africa House in Dortmund. We also have Via Tata of the German African Society at the International Institute of Dortmund and Chief Editor of Africa Positive magazine. Also joining us from Berlin is Olaf Sundermeyer, journalist from RBB News. So thank you everyone for coming. We just want to talk about the space we're sharing right now. It spans thousands of miles and represents the experiences of many also beyond the panel. So you are representatives of your communities, and we thank you for doing that. One of respect and open-mindedness, with the shared goal of gaining a better understanding of not only the causes of racism, how communities can work together to fight social injustice. So at this time, I would like to ask any non-panelists to stop their video feed for us. And we would also ask everyone on the panel and guests as well to place your microphones on mute and raise your hand if you would like to contribute so that we can better hear the active speaker. I will call on you as soon as the last speaker has finished if you have raised your hand. We ask everyone to speak as clearly as possible and thank our Dortmund friends for agreeing to hold the panel in English. Are there any questions? Okay, I will start by handing it over to the co-host and moderator from Dortmund, Gerald Baars, and he will do an introduction followed by a few specific questions to each of our panelists, and we'll continue with the discussion from there. Gerald?
Yeah, hi Dan. Good morning, America. Good evening here in Germany. Hope you enjoyed a wonderful 4th of July weekend. Independence Day is a perfect date for our panel discussion. Almost 250 years ago, the founders of the United States, George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, Benjamin Franklin, and all the others, had freedom, justice, and peace in mind when they declared independence and worked out the constitution of a democratic federal state. At that time, the German regions were still ruled by kings and nobles. And 75 years ago, our country, Germany, was only liberated by the Americans and their allies from the most barbarous regime the world had ever seen before, the Nazis and the cruel, horrible Holocaust, an institutional, systematic genocide of 6 million people only because of a different religious belief. We should never forget it and do everything that anti-Semitism, racism, discrimination will never happen again. America had experienced brutal slavery and a civil war about it and a long, stony way and fight to overcome. A struggle for same rights for all mankind. And now, today, let's talk about it and find out, did we really achieve some rights and opportunities for all in America and Europe? I would like to start with the mayor of Buffalo, but I'm not sure if he has joined us already now.
He's on his way.
Okay, then let's start instead of him with Dr. Katherine Conway-Turner, the president of the Buffalo State College. And my question to her is, we are certainly not born as racist. It's all about socialization and education, isn't it? You educate young people with different color and belief, and what do you observe?
I'm sorry, I didn't exactly understand the question. I know I heard that you mentioned it's all about education, but was there a specific question that you could repeat?
Now, my question is, we are not born as racist. How does
Ah,
it come that people become racist? It's about socialization, education, and as someone who works together with young people, you can certainly explain a little bit.
exactly. Certainly no child is born a racist. Unfortunately, we live in a world that has been predicated on racist and discriminatory beliefs for many, many years. You mentioned the slavery, but way before that, when the United States, when the first people came to the United States and found Native Americans throughout this country. So it really starts even before that. But how does it actually develop and how is it maintained? I think that part of the issue is the desire for power, and that as individuals seek to be in power, that we have had the unfortunate situation that they subjugate others. And how do you subjugate others? Well, you create a distance between yourself and them, and then you imbue the other person or people with traits that are considered negative, and then you teach those traits generation after generation, so that it gets to a point where people don't even have to give the lesson anymore. It's endemic in the situation, it's systematic, it's institutionalized. And so that's what makes it so very, very difficult to break. So to break racist views and other views takes both education, but it also takes the willingness for people to look carefully at themselves and the power that they hold and how they got that power and how that power is maintained. And so it really, yes, I'm an educator and I believe strongly in really helping people to break into that and understand it. But it is a very complicated situation because after years of structurally creating systems that discriminate against others, then people don't even see the many, many ways that discrimination is occurring.
And
Thank you very much, Dr. Conway-Turner. Do we have Klaus Wegner with us?
Hi, Dan. Yes.
Yeah, hi, Klaus. It's great to see you again. I wanted to address this to you, the following question. You are in contact and work with a huge multicultural community and might give us maybe an overview on the situation in Germany with regards to racism, how it's present, what it looks like, what minorities are feeling in, especially in Dortmund, outside of the International Institute.
Yes, thank you, Dan. So first of all, I'm very happy to see you and the other ones here again, and later maybe Mayor Brown. And thanks for joining us tonight. It's a pleasure for us to see you all. So your question then, it's no question about. So we have racism in many different expressions, not even in Germany today. And for me, sometimes it feels like cancer. It eats up our society from inside. And in some expressions, we face racism in everyday's life without to recognize it. We have today a discussion about some names of very old brands, like Uncle Ben's rice. You know it in America as well, like we here in Germany. Or the Negerkuss, Negro kiss. children like it. The fact that we talk about all this is very interesting, in my opinion, because these names are used since decades, and now we see what's the effect in the background is. It seems to be harmless, but it's the beginning of racism, in my opinion. The scope of racism starts with that, and it ends on the streets of Minneapolis when some policemen shot really harmless demonstrants. So if we ask for ideas how to prevent for racism, I would say it's political education, and that is the main thing the Auslandsgesellschaft stood for. We need professional, interesting, growing political education, especially for young people. And we can see it's hard work to defeat racism, but we can keep it small and comprehensible. And that's the most important thing we have to do.
Then I would,
Thank you, Klaus. Gerald?
yeah, then I would like to continue with Dr. Crystal Rodriguez. She's the Chief of Staff and Diversity Officer at the Buffalo State College. State College has the feeling of white supremacy become more obvious and aggressive recently in the United States? Is my questions. I had the personal feeling that after Barack Obama had become elected president, that color doesn't matter anymore in the States, or at least does matter less.
Sorry, I didn't unmute fast enough. Hello, everyone. And thank you, Gerald, for your question. I don't think that, I think that a lot of people thought that electing a Black president, I mean, even locally in Buffalo, electing a Black mayor meant that there had been a tremendous amount of progress made. And I agree that there has been some progress, but it goes back to what Dr. Conway-Turner mentioned, and I'm sure we'll talk about in this panel going on. Individuals have been taught and they have been indoctrinated to believe certain racist views and disparate views. And even our system, even though we just celebrated 243 years of independence, our system has been set up to have racist ideas in it. And it's not going to change with 8 years of someone in an administration. We really have to address the systemic problems that we have by looking at racial impacts of our policies and procedures as they are, but also addressing our individual biases that we all have. I was raised with a grandmother who grew up in Alabama in the South. She's African American, and she has ideas that were discussed at the kitchen table, I'd like to say, when I was growing up. And I had to look at those ideas that came from her personal experiences. I had to look at them and decide if I was going to believe the same thing, apply the same ideas. So we have to not only address the systemic things, but we have to address our individual. So has there been progress made? Of course, but there's so far for us to go, as we see with the recent happenings here in America.
I'm not sure if it's my turn now to ask a question. I thought Dan might continue.
Yes, I'm ready, Gerald. The next question is actually for Kevin Matuke. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, it's right. You did well.
Okay. Yes. Thank you for joining us. The question for you: racism has always existed in history to some extent. Has it become again worse recently? And maybe what are some experiences of yours, of others, or maybe just some observations?
Thanks very much for having me on the panel. I want to attest to the fact that racism has been a practice, one of the hardest virus, if we want to call it, in history, because till now, we haven't been able to have a cure on it. It has continued to spread in our society in a very alarming rate that we can see in Germany that even some of our minority politicians, like Dr. Jabi Karamba from the Social Democratic Party, the office was being attacked. That's somebody who is meant to represent the nation, but he is not still considered as being part of the society. It's also to be seen also within the normal social realm of the society here in Germany, that wherever you go, you find people who still believe that you are here to take up their opportunities, their jobs. So it's an aspect that is implanted in the system, in our society, and we can only work on against that if we look at the structural aspect of it. For instance, we have the Article 3 of the German Constitution that describes race as an aspect. We should avoid classifying people according to their race if we want to fight racism. It's a policy that has to be done by everybody. It's not the amount of police officers that we put to avoid brutality or something like that. It's about educating most of our people and involving the people who are victims of these cases, attacks, to be part of the solution. We have definitely seen an upsurge of racist activities in Germany in the past. That shows also the solidarity that the community had for us in the month of June, on the 6th of June in Dortmund, when we did a major anti-demonstration against racism and solidarity for George Floyd, where we had more than 5,000 people, Germans and non-Germans, who came out of the street in Dortmund to solidarize with this situation and call for a stop against racism. And this process also continued in the coming weeks in Dortmund, and it's also extending in other parts of the country. So I think it's a duty for us to look at it in depth of it and to try to educate the people about who we are. We must not also devolve the aspect of that we have differences of people in terms of color or religion, but we have to explain it to educate the people why is it that way. I think if we go in this position, in this format, it's going to help us rather than us avoiding to talk about it.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin Matuke here in Dortmund, and I go over to Buffalo because he has made clear that the problem is really the same in Germany, in Europe, as in America. And so it's very important to have a twin city partnership between Buffalo and Dortmund. And therefore I would turn to Brenda Brown, the chairman of the Twin City Committee in Buffalo. We are glad that she's joining our panel tonight, tonight or today in America. And I hope to get some impressions of hers, how our partnership, our exchange might help to overcome the racism on both sides.
Brenda, you need to unmute.
Okay. If I heard you right, you asked me how I feel that we could. If you can ask it again, I was trying to listen, but I couldn't hear. Could you repeat the question just one more time?
Yeah. Brenda, my question was, we have the problem on both sides of the Atlantic, and how can a partnership between two twin cities help to overcome this racism on both sides of the Atlantic?
It's hard to say, really, because I feel that, as someone had just said, as children, we are born not really seeing colors. And as we grow, and our parents, I think things and the news and different things that we hear help to form different things in the mind. We over here in Buffalo, as an educator, I worked in a school and worked with a local historian, Eva Doyle, who pushed the effort of African American history, where students learned about the contributions that African Americans have contributed to the making of the United States. Many of these different statues and different things that you see in Washington, D.C., many of those things were done by famous African Americans. So really, I really look for racism to be here, because it's, to me, it's generational, and I don't think that it's gonna stop overnight. And it's not gonna even stop by learning, because there's still the stereotypes of different things that people know and have heard. I'm gonna tell you a stereotype that I had of Germany when I first went, when I was Germany, was of the concentration camps. I as a person learning about that and going over there, I never wanted to go there, because I didn't feel that that I would be really accepted until I went over there and I got to commune and got to meet different people. And then to actually learn about the history of Germany, it changed my mind. But as a child, all I heard was of that side. So as I said, I don't think racism really is gonna end, because it's really, as generations come up and they hear different things or they see different things, it's the mindset. It's gonna always be passed on from generation to generation. That's all I can say. Unless people learn about the history and start changing within themselves and looking at people differently, and looking at people's opinions and accepting people's opinions, but that's the way I see it.
Thank you, Brenda. The next question, and everybody has some great things to say. In the interest of time, maybe we could keep responses to a minute so that we can get to the discussion. This next one is for Dr. Rosalyn Dressman. Are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Dressman, hello, and welcome to the panel. You are Executive Director of the Africa Tide Union and the host in Africa House Dortmund. There's a meeting point for many Africans around in the area around Dortmund. Do they need protected shelters? Do persons of African background need protection?
Well, my discussion or my contribution to this discussion will be coming from the institutional point of view. Racism, to stop it, we have to walk through the institutions. You can't really stop racism, but you can curb it. We can control it. We can control the way people think about us. So if the institutions get a little bit open, that will allow Africans to integrate properly. And how will the institution get open? We have to work against discrimination in the job market, what we're facing in the moment, really strongly. We have to, work against systematic denial of fundamental rights. What is happening very well in Germany here, you see it in the banks, you see it in the schools. And then we have to work against systematic misinformation to the generation we're discussing right now, because the children are properly misinformed. They are not carried along culturally. We have to work, we have to do a lot of work, to be able to curb the point racism. And I think the work has just started in the sense that we are talking to each other.
Yeah, thank you very much for the first statement of Rosalyn Dressman. And I think I have seen the mayor of Buffalo now hasn't joined us, Byron William Brown II. Dan?
Yes, he has joined us.
Okay, and he can hear me. Mayor? I can't hear him.
Mr. Brown, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect, thank you.
So my question from Germany is, after Rosalyn Dressman has described a kind of institutional discrimination of the Africans in Germany, is there also institutional discrimination going on in the United States, or in particular in Buffalo?
So the question is there institutional racism in the United States?
Yes, and discrimination, yeah.
Well, first, let me thank all of you for allowing me to participate in this panel discussion between Dortmund, Germany and Buffalo, New York. We've enjoyed a long sister city relationship with Dortmund. This is a global conversation, so it takes on even more significance. There certainly has been institutional racism in America. That institutional racism has existed for over 400 years. It seems to be most pernicious as it relates to people of African descent, Black people, but minority people in general have experienced racism in America. We are now at another point where racial injustice, racial inequity, and racism is being discussed in Buffalo. It's being discussed all across the country, but it's also being discussed globally. There are many people that are hopeful in Buffalo, in America, and globally that finally this discussion of systemic racism, systemic racial inequality will produce even more real change in our country and in our community. We need to understand that education is certainly an important factor. Telling the authentic stories of the contributions of people of African descent, African people, Black people, other people of color is critically important. Oftentimes people don't get those real, authentic stories, but I think we also need a media and social media that is fact-checked. There is a lot of misinformation, factual inaccuracy that is spread in the media itself, the mainstream media, as well as social media, and that also contributes to the systemic racism that we see in America. So people not only getting education, but getting factual information in the media and social media is critically important to addressing racial inequity in America.
Thank you, Mayor. Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I have one question for Olaf Sundermeyer. So as an experienced journalist who has done a lot of research on extremism, when we talk about hate speech and racism, is it a kind of human fear or concern against something strange or different that a lot of people have? And is that something that causes racism?
Hello, everybody. Do you understand me? Am I understandable? Hello? Yeah?
Yes.
Thank you very much for invitation to this panel as well. And of course, racism and other group focus enmities such as anti-Semitism, homophobia, and so on are attitudes you find everywhere in all society. We heard it before, as well as you find it in Germany. But here in Germany, after the year 45, Gerald Baars pointed out on the beginning that when Germany actually was deliberated by not only the United States, by the Western allies, people agreed on an unwritten contract, society contract in Germany, not to openly speak out racism for a long time. And this unwritten contract kind of lasted 70 years. I would say till the year of 2015. Now, this attitude of racism and other group-focused enmities are not necessarily higher in the percentage as it used to be in the past, but it is shown much more publicly, much more in the political discourse on the streets, also in racist attacks, such the one that Kevin Matuke pointed out when he quoted the example of Mr. Karamba, the member of parliament from Halle in Sachsen-Anhalt here in Germany. So this unwritten contract is broken since we not only, but we have very strong right-wing groups. We have a populist party, a right populist party that started its race on the peak of the migration crisis here in Germany. Now you find this party in every federal parliaments all over Germany, in all the 16 federal parliaments. It's the strongest opposition party in German Bundestag, in the federal parliament, and this party kind of gives, it's like a loudspeaker, a voice to all the people that have these attitudes and always had these attitudes. So I would say these attitudes are not new. They are part of the society in Germany as well. But for a few years now, it is much more shown in the public life. And I would say at a person that is not personally involved with racism, because I'm a white guy, that the cancer, the disease of racism shows its symptoms much stronger since that year of 2015 here in Germany than it did before.
Thank you very much, Olaf Sundermeyer, for the first round. And that brings me to Ronald Dixon. He's a co-founder of Peace, Unity, and Freedom Reform of Buffalo. And I'm curious to know if there is something similar going on in America, that during the last years, this attitude got a kind of loudspeaker, or is becoming louder. And how came, and I guess because of that came your organization to life. What are you told?
I think I kind of heard a little bit of the question there. First, again, I want to thank everyone for inviting me on the panel discussion this morning. So a little bit about Puff Reform. It was created with the vision of pushing a new narrative, an agenda that portrays Black men as confident, loved, intelligent, and united. Our plan is to focus on uniting men leaders of African descent from different regions and cultures, nationalities, creeds, religions, and careers. Our objective is really to demand justice by speaking up on solutions that will rectify the criminal justice system here in Buffalo, but then hopefully a blueprint to the rest of the world, and then globally if we can. And so it was kind of birthed in this unique moment where there has been a shutdown of vacations because of the global health pandemic. There has been a shutdown of sports and entertainment. And so it has heightened the discussion on injustices that have been done to Black communities. And so we wanted to be a voice for the voiceless here in Buffalo. And so a lot that is going on is around the racism of really Black families. And so what we wanted to do was, as men, step up in our communities and step up in different areas and come together and unite to speak as one for the Black family. And so kind of the discussion really should incorporate the Black family. I think they are the ones that are truly dealing with the brutalization and the racism, just racism in a whole. So I think when we're having this discussion, I think the inclusion and diversity, the discussion should be coming from those who have endured or who have been through this. And because I think we as a collective need to start listening to them and crediting their narratives as much as we credit so-called professionals or journalism, speakers or writers who have contributed to truly silencing the real narrative. I think we need to be cognizant and aware that there is a lot that needs to be done. And so our goal from PUF is to really work with the government administration here in Buffalo. We have already started to sit down and discuss things with Mayor Brown with phase 1 of the reform. And so we are super grateful that they are listening. And we already started by listing legislative agendas to end police brutality here in the urban communities and the minority communities. If you guys did not know, Buffalo is still one of the top 7 segregated cities throughout the United States. And so it's very easy to pinpoint who is in which area in the city of Buffalo. And so some of the things that we've outlined that we're moving forward with doing is outlining a curriculum. Because you sit here and we say, remember one of the first questions you asked was about race. There is a lack of identity here when you're referring to the Black Americans. And so there needs to be an understanding of history. There needs to be an understanding of genealogy. There needs to be an understanding of civic engagement. And so there's financial literacy. There's so much that has to be done in order to organize and prepare these communities who have been abused by this plight of an issue of racism, and not just in America, but all over globally. And so what we're trying to do is work hand in hand with the Buffalo government and try to create an organized concept that we can actually pull quantitative and qualitative data from, so we can actually show true change happening in our community and actually hopefully be a blueprint to the rest of the United States and globally.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dixon, and thank you to each panelist for answering those questions. And we would like to, with that, move along to our second round. What are the reasons for racism? So historically, psychologically, socially, institutionally. Anybody who would like to start is welcome to. I just ask that you raise your hand so we can allow everybody an opportunity to speak. So again, we're going back to the reasons for racism, if anybody would like to elaborate. Brenda? I'm sorry, I'm sorry, Dr. Conway-Turner was first.
Yes, I was just going to say a couple of things. The reasons for racism, particularly if you want to focus on the Black experience. I think that one of the things that happened back 400 years ago is that one needed to justify the institution of slavery. So how do you justify the reality of taking people from their home and placing them in slavery and then holding them in slavery generation after generation? And so I think that racism was a tool that was used at that point and has continued to be morphed in various ways over the centuries to maintain that power differential. And so that if you want to create a hierarchy and you want to make sure that one group is over other groups, then you create a number of sociological, psychological ways to justify it. And so what has happened in today's world is that even though the forms have changed over the years, that it continues to be intact. And what's really troubling for me is not only the rigidity of breaking through racism here in the United States, but seeing it worldwide. You know, as our colleague said earlier, this is not just a US thing, it's not even just a Germany thing. We're seeing this dynamic rigidly held over and over again throughout the world. And I also would say one thing which is sort of related to this as well, is that I'm not sure the brutal manifestations of racism have increased over the years. They have always been there. In my lifetime, there were always Black and brown people being murdered, Black and brown people put in jail, Black and brown people not having basic needs. So it's always been there. But right now, I think we have an opportunity because through social media and through the actual visual lens that we're seeing it. And so that people who might have ignored it, not thought about it before are seeing it. But I really think that it is, you know, it's a system in place to hold a hierarchy in place of power. And that as long as you can, somebody can justify it and blame the people who are getting discriminated against for the position they're in, that'll stay in place. And so we have to break that notion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Conway-Turner. Brenda, could you unmute before you speak?
Okay. In answer to your question, why is there a reason for racism? I don't believe there is. There should never be a reason for it. It's just that, as the previous speakers spoke, it's the hierarchy. We were brought, African Americans, ancestors were brought over here as slaves, came over as slaves. They came from Africa, which also had slaves. Even though some of them had slaves and they were sold to the captains when they came over, the ship people. The difference between their slavery and our slavery was that it was dehumanized. It was dehumanized, where it was looked at property, and Black people were treated very unfairly and as less than being human. As I said before, I don't think racism will ever go away. It might just die down because if it's not changed here, it's going to always be fed at some point in time. It's going to always be fed. And that was my main point. And I also would like to thank you for inviting me to be on this panel, because I'm really learning a lot. I am a historian and a genealogist. And in studying genealogy, you look back at family and you see a lot of the injustices that have been done back during the years, even within your own family, that you didn't know about, because many African Americans, your older African Americans, don't talk about a lot of the things that happened to their people back during the time that as coming up from slavery on up, because of the sometimes don't want to discuss it because they relive it. But as the young man, as Ron Dixon said, you have to know history and you have to know the genealogy. Just like I said, when I visited Germany, I had one thing in mind about Germany until I got there and I saw something else different. So that's it. I just feel there's no reason for it. But like I said, it's inborn here and it's passed from generation to generation. It might lower it a little bit, but I doubt very seriously if it's gonna stop it much. That's
Brenda, may I jump in from Germany? Gerald Baars here. We heard it now very often that racism is inherited from generation to generation. It is very old, and the slavery was already known in antique Greek, and the Romans had their slaves.
Right.
This is human, obviously, but don't we have to cut the old history by changing our consciousness? I mean, for instance, in Germany, I stick to Germany, we have still street names or streets named after people who were involved in the Nazi regime. And nobody is aware of the history of these people, or we have monuments of people in the pre-Nazi time who helped the Nazis to get in power, and we have never discussed it. I mean, we have started now a discussion about getting rid of these names or monuments, and I see it in America too. Christopher Columbus was thrown in Baltimore, I think, in the water of the harbor. Does it help?
Yes, I think I understood your question. I understood what you said about now that people are, you're starting to really look back at the history of Nazism, and I guess in the statues or the things that are going on here, such as the taking down of certain statues that were of people that were for slavery and did not, in the history we know. As I think that's where I'm headed, because it's really hard. It's really hard to hear. So I have to put ear to the thing. But as I said again, racism will always. I just feel it would always just be here. It would always be here. It would not cease. Even if we, no matter how many statues or different things that we might take down of people and not honor people of different things, just like the 4th of July. We just had the 4th of July. I don't celebrate the 4th of July because the 4th of July, my people were still enslaved. So there's nothing good about it. Juneteenth is our celebration of the 4th, because that was the time in which they learned that slaves learned that they were free. So it's just the way we look at it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Brenda. Where are we seeing institutional racism? Where are we seeing this? I mean, we always pointed out that it exists, but maybe if we could get a few specific examples. You hear about redlining for credit to finance a new house. You know, if you're living in a poor area, you're automatically going to be rejected for a home loan, which means your situation is perpetuated and you're stuck where you are. Does anybody have any other examples of institutional racism? Crystal, yes, go ahead, please.
And that's a great question. One of my friends, we've been in dialogue on Facebook, and she's white, and she says there is racism, but there's no systemic or institutional racism. And that's actually a flawed idea. One of the examples in Buffalo is the redlining that you just gave. You know, we know historically that we have actual maps of banks that they use where in certain neighborhoods they weren't giving loans to certain people. And ironically, those are some of the poorest neighborhoods currently in the city of Buffalo. Some of the other laws that we have on the books, even at a national level, is we know that crack cocaine is a derivative of cocaine. However, some of the punishment laws for crack cocaine, which is pervasive in minority communities, are much more stringent than for possession of cocaine. So you can go to jail for possession of crack cocaine potentially for the rest of your life, where cocaine, it might not be as severe. So we can see a severity there, and it's a domino effect, because if it's more prevalent in minority communities, then more people of minority descent would be incarcerated for longer periods of time. And that's why I really recommend, excuse me, a look at policies and procedures. Some of the things that we have still on the books as laws and as statutes may not be currently intended to have disparate effects, but they do. And so if we look at it and we ask ourselves, it's called a racial impact analysis, racial equity impact analysis, and looking at how, not your intentions, but looking at how the policies actually affect different communities, we can begin to combat some of those institutional and systemic statutes and laws that are in place that have different effects on communities of color than they do for people of the majority population.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Mr. Dixon?
Right. I just want to first start this off by just quoting Confucius. He says, the man who can and the man who says he can't are both correct. I really do think that we can end racism. I think just alluding to some racial systematic systems, as the Dr. Rodriguez just commented on, you have the criminal justice system. I think you're looking at education, you're looking at the banks, you're looking at the police department, you're looking at the sheriff departments. I think anywhere where there is a lack of diversity and inclusion from everyone at the table, then there is going to be some form of systematic oppression or racism in that conversation or in that discussion. And so it's so important for both diversity and inclusion in all committees throughout whatever category they're in, whether we're talking about banking, whether we're talking about real estate, whether we're talking about education, and then they all have to have the same goal, which is empowering the ones that don't have a voice. It's one thing to say we're going to do something. It's another thing to actually organize and structure a plan up. And then the last part of that you cannot forget is the data. There has to be quantitative and qualitative data that is being pulled that we can go back and actually say, in this last year, this is what we have been able to accomplish. And this is what we're now being able to do. This is who's received it. This is who hasn't. And then that needs to go back and continue to be revamped over and over again until there's a remedy for what we're enduring right now. I think there is no other time than right now to deal with this. This is one of the, it's very unique. This moment that we're in right now. There is a heightened discussion, and I really think that this time now more than any time before, we are going to be able to make real change, not just here in Buffalo again, but throughout the world.
Ron here in Germany, in Dortmund, Rosalyn Dressman of African Tide, our host here where we are, had nodded all the time and want to add something.
So yeah, we're talking about institutional discrimination, or so to say. I would like to give it another little name. I would like to call it professional racism. So now our African children are going through a lot of things. They go out of their homes every day, go to school, they're in Germany. After school, they come back home, they're in Africa. When they go out to play on the street, either they become Turkish kids or whichever country they mix together to play. And most of the time, these children are growing up in very extreme poverty situation. Even though we're in Germany, our last Prime Minister said no child is left alone, every child will be carried along. But most of these children are definitely not carried along. And why is it so? It is because of institutional discrimination. And I think that it is a part of a systematic filtering they are doing so that the African child remains poor and needy and be cleaners like their parents for generation after generation. This is the kind of discrimination I'm talking about. And in order for us to deal with this kind of situation, we need education. We need inclusive programs, that will draw people together, that will watch over our children even more closer, so that, sometimes we We produce, you know, doctors, we produce lawyers that will defend us, we will produce in every profession. But I know that Germany is not ready to have Black police people. We have serious problem there. If Germany will start opening up their very close institutions to people of color, things will look a bit differently. They do a lot of profiling of Africans and they give it different names. They control it for every situation. Or for example, you know, you need a permit, you want to open a business, they make it as difficult for you as possible so that you are not capable of running the business. For them, a business should be run by the white blocks and the Black ones will be rather the cleaners. I mean, I'm not trying to paint in this discussion anybody white or Black. Of course, we have a lot of people that are against this kind of systematic discrimination. And that is why we have to talk about it so that they hear it and they support us fight against it. Thank you very much.
Rosalyn, our president in Germany, Mr. Steinmeier, has recently said something I think it was important. He said, it is not enough not to be a racist. It is important to be an anti-racist, to fight racism. So at least the man on the top of our government tries to fight racism.
It's a collective assignment. It is not a fight for one person. From our part as Africans also, we have to, you know, contribute to the process so that it will be successful for us. I'm a first generation person in Germany. I want to produce my children and see them, you know, go beyond where I have been. And I want to see my grandchildren also in the institution. They have to be anchored properly in there. And in order for that to happen, I have to work hard. Not like, you know, working hard, earning money. No, I have to work hard with the community I live so that the integration will happen. It is all about education, like we all have been saying here today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dressman. I would actually like to follow up with a question for Dr. Conway-Turner. According to collegefactual.com, Buffalo State College faculty is composed of 81.9% white faculty. I don't know how accurate that is. I had a lot of trouble finding other numbers. However, you were chosen by SUNY, the State University of New York, to introduce the Prodigy program. If you could maybe expand on, tell us what this Prodigy initiative is from the State University of New York. And also I'm looking at a letter from the SUNY Black Faculty and Staff Collective. It's a call to action that says Buffalo State College or SUNY schools need to do more than just what is involved in this Prodigy program. Would you mind elaborating for me? Oh, unmute you. Yes, thank you.
Now
thank
you can hear me. Sorry. Absolutely, I'll respond to that. And first, I'd like to say that in terms of discrimination and how you see it, that if there's an inverse relationship between positions of power or positions that have lots of monetary reward and the number of African Americans or Black people in those positions. And so when you think about on my college campus, 55% of our students are students of color, Black students, brown students, students of color, and about 18% of our faculty are faculty of color. So there's a huge differential between the number of students representing diverse groups and the number of faculty representing diverse groups. And so to me, when you look at that figure, whether you're talking about Buffalo State or other campuses, it is a great manifestation of the racism that we see, because you cannot hire who is not in the pipeline. And if students are not in the pipeline, then they will never be able to get the PhD, which is a degree that's required to be hired. And so you can't just say, you know, you can't find people from nowhere to put in the faculty. You've got to start at an earlier age to make sure that every student, every child, every Black child, every brown child has the same opportunity to do well in school, to get a master's degree, to get a PhD, and to then become a faculty member if that's what he or she chooses. So the Prodigy program is a program that really encourages campuses to seek and recruit faculty of color from across the world, across the country, across the world. It is a process where we, led by our Chief Diversity Officer, we go out and visit with people that are completing their doctorates in various places. We recruit them to Buffalo because of the great things happening in Buffalo, and we hopefully will get them on our campus. But it is a slow, painstaking process. So that's why it's not enough. I agree that it's not enough because it really predicates itself on the small pool of people of color that are already coming out of the various fields, and then us enticing them to Buffalo versus someplace else they might go. So it is a good step. It's a first step, but it is not the only step. We also have a project on our campus where we also invite students in doctoral programs that are completing their degree who have not completed yet to come through a different kind of prodigy level. And so they come and spend a couple of years on campus. Hopefully they will finish their degree, fall in love with Buffalo State, and stay as well. But that also is not enough, even though both of those are really good ways to increase our numbers. We have to be working on what is happening at the younger ages so that our elementary school children are doing really well. They have the same opportunity as Dr. Dressman said, they have the same opportunity when they're young to then aspire for greatness, to aspire to be a faculty member, a doctor, a lawyer, whatever he or she wants to do. And so we know that it takes many years and a lot of painstaking work to do that. But as these young people, let's say we're being very successful, getting them to think about doing well in school and moving forward, they can't hit those barriers. They can't hit policies that prevent them from going to college. They can't hit policies that prevent them from going to graduate school. And so when I think about how complicated the system is, I realize that we have to keep our eyes on all the various policies that are gatekeeping our kids from being able to rise to the ultimate level of doctoral degrees to then think about being a faculty member. Because once you have a PhD, generally you can do many other things. You don't have to be just a faculty member. And so how do we, to make sure we have sizable numbers. So it is very complicated. So I both working really hard on the Prodigy, both recruiting faculty, recruiting doctoral candidates to come to campus, but I realize it is not enough. We need to do more, but it unfortunately takes time to grow someone into the possibility of being a PhD candidate to come to Buffalo State.
Thank you very much, Dr. Conway-Turner. You know, you know, I couldn't help but think, you know, it's about sharing the privilege as well. Everybody needs to be on the same level when it comes to the privilege. I had two hands raised. I had Kevin Matuke and Mayor Byron Brown. For future reference, if you would just leave your hands raised so that I can see who would like to speak. I'm not sure who is up next. I will give Kevin Matuke the floor, if you don't mind, Mayor Brown. Thank you very much. Kevin?
Yeah, once more, thanks for giving me the floor. I just wanted to share some concrete examples of systematic or administrative racism that we have within our system that at times we don't actually see into it that it's important to kick it out. We think it's just an aspect of the state. In Germany, we have what they call there's a law they call racial profiling for police people. And this law has been enacted in the administrative courts, has been given orders that it is legal for police people to control people because of their skin color or their attitude, the way they look, which is actually an institutional form of allowing racism. Last week, there are some areas in Germany who came out categorically against this aspect of racial profiling. And I think that the country is on a good foot to see that such a law has to be taken off, because we are all humans, and we don't need to control B or A because he or she is green, blue, or white. So I think this is a very clear example in the German structure that had existed probably since 2012, racial profiling, where people have to be controlled because of their colors. We also have a phenomenon in the what Dr. Dressman just said about the integration of migrant population. We have a quarter of the German population who are migrants, of migrants' descent, but it is unfortunately very less represented in some of the mainline structure of the country. For instance, in the German parliament, we just have 9% of the parliamentarians who are people with migrant descent, just 9%. In the German media, for instance, there is very, very deplorable situation. We just have about close to 6% who are persons with migration backgrounds. And that goes further in the public services. And what we expect to have to do is to have an inclusive communities where the children, our children and their children could one day become, aspire to become also mayors of their towns, public civil servants with good categories. And for it to happen, they have to have some forebuild, some role models. And this is what is lacking. If we want to talk about achieved integration, we have to see that we have persons there who people look upon them. And these are usually the same people who share the same affinity with these persons. So I think Germany is on a good footing in fighting all these, but these are things we have to say it out.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matuke. Mayor Brown?
It is police, media, education, higher education, unions, and on and on and on, a lack of representation of Black people and other people of color in those sectors of society. That's clearly an example of systemic racism. And all of those sectors, all of those institutions need to be right now, in this moment, working on reforming themselves. When I was elected mayor of Buffalo, I became the first Black mayor of this city that was incorporated almost 200 years ago. So in almost 200 years, the first Black mayor of the city of Buffalo, a city that was incorporated in 1832. Now, in my administration, we have intentionally worked to diversify the different departments in city government. So now there are more Black people working in city government than ever in the history of the city of Buffalo. There are more Latino people working in city government than ever in the history of the city of Buffalo. Many other minorities working in the city of Buffalo in larger numbers than ever. And that was done intentionally. So diversity and inclusion has to be an intentional thing. We have a higher percentage of Blacks, Latinos, and other minorities on the Buffalo Police Department than ever before in the history of the city of Buffalo. We have more Blacks, Latinos, and other minorities on the Buffalo Fire Department than ever in the history of the city of Buffalo. We have more lawyers of color working for the city of Buffalo than any law firm in Buffalo or Erie County, than any other government in our community. And we've done those things by recruiting people of diverse backgrounds, by hiring people of diverse backgrounds, and that has to be intentional in every sector of society in Western New York, in the state of New York, in America, in Germany, and across the globe.
Thank you very much, Mayor. From Germany, Gerald Baars speaking. I think that is one very important recipe you have given us, or example, how to not to eliminate racism, but to decrease and to empower the minorities in all institutions. I would like to bring in a second aspect, like what can the ordinary citizens do to fight racism? That is to say, do we all act enough to contradict stupid sayings on the street? Yeah, because just people, right extremists or racist people say time and again, I'm allowed to say that. No, you are not, because that is not moral, that is not okay, that is not the agreement we have in our society. I don't want to hear such a stupid thing again.
So the question is, are we doing enough as communities to combat racism? Gerald, am I correct?
Yep, yep.
Ron.
So to answer that question, I would say no. I definitely think we're making strides as a community to address racism, but is that enough? In my opinion, I'm going to say no. I think there needs, kind of touching back on literally what the mayor just said, there needs to be an intentional movement at organizing and addressing racism on every level. That includes community engagement as well. These communities need to be organized, and it needs to have a system in place that we can follow. And going back, I don't want to keep harping on it, but that we can be able to track and show that there's data that is showing you that we started at one point, and then this quantitative data and qualitative data has now pushed us to a point where we can go back and reflect on what we've done and how effective it is. It's about the impact, not just being able to set it up, but actually seeing impact, positive impact come about.
Thank you. Brenda? Unmute?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with Ron, but in one aspect, I believe that under Eva Doyle, and as they have said also during the violence that has been going on in here, and many of the teachers are calling for more African American history. Teaching children from children up will give them a better sense of the different cultures. Now, when I was working in the school system and I was assistant Eva Doyle, we covered African American history and their contributions. We also covered women's history, Native American history. That is to kill a lot of the stereotypes that we see and that we hear. In order to better learn about a culture, to read up on them. And then one other aspect, when I was in college, when I was attending Madai, I took a multicultural class where we had to go into a culture that we were not familiar with. And the culture that I went and spent the time with was with the Amish, because I didn't know much about them. So I feel just by learning more about people, talking to them, and reading up on their history, as I do even with the Arab community. I don't know, I have a stereotype about them. However, I do engage in conversation where I do get to learn how they learn about them. And that's my way of learning about them, is by talking to them. So I think in one aspect, we're trying, such as like they said in the school system, to have the students become more educated. And that will kill a lot of stereotypes. Because when you look at racism, like the question that he imposed, he said, is the community doing enough to stop racism? Is it really racism, or is it stereotypes? That we have something that, like African Americans, when they move into a place, sometimes they used to say they used to tear the houses up. Or that's why a lot of landlords didn't want to rent to them, because they would, but it's not typical of everybody. It was just more or less, it's general. And I'm not going to say they did it. Nobody really knows really what happened or what happened in the thing. But are we really talking about racism, or, like I said, or stereotypes? That's my answer.
Thank you very much, Brenda. And I would like to say goodbye to Mayor Byron Brown, who has to depart the meeting. Thank you very much for participating, Mr. Mayor. We do appreciate your input.
And here in Dortmund, the president.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Bye from Dortmund. And here in Dortmund, Klaus Wegener, the president of the Society for Foreign Affairs, has raised his hand.
So, before you leave, Mayor Brown, many greetings from Germany. I remember our last meeting when I had been in your city hall 2 years ago with our Lord Mayor, Mr. Zieber.
He's gone. He left already.
Okay. So let him know that. But from my German point of view, I agree with the speakers before. We definitely do not enough against racism. Where do we face racism? In the daily life, in the subway, in the supermarket, in schools. We have the discussion in Germany now in a special part of in a part of our special forces. So on a very wide range of in the society, we face racism every day. And how can racism grow up? Mostly if a majority feels like a superiority about others, about a minority. And I have heard a slogan, and I like it very much. It's called, "Education is freedom." And racists are not really free people because they are very bad educated. So political education, in my point of view, is the key against racism. And that's the reason why organizations like African Tide or the Auslandsgesellschaft Foreign Society are so important, because they give a floor for all the people who don't want the racist, so in the words of our Bundespräsident, anti-racist. And that's my point of view. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Klaus. Yeboah, you had your hand up.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Yeboah, Councillor of State in the state of Ratingen. We just said something, Brenda said something, she thinks racism is in the head and it can't go. I think if we start from now implementing all race, talking about colonialism in schools, teaching them the history of this colonialism, they don't mention it in the schools. The children grow up, they don't know what is happening, they don't know how to go about it. And racism is, nobody is born with racism. It's from your household, how they bring you up, what they tell you, that's what the child follows. So if we start from ourselves, from the household, and telling the children, go to school, if you see a black, it's coming from so and so, that is just normal people. Even the children have started asking questions now. My children go to school with other white children, they used to ask them, what is it all about, this Black Lives Matters? What is the problem? You are just like me. So if we start teaching at school, and then start letting also people in communities to also employ Black people, then those things will stop. But they don't let anybody in. It's just like blocked. So it's going to take time. So it's time we start doing something in Germany, because for years, they've been giving deaf ears, and it's really, really bad. People are going through mess every day, in and out. So I hope things will change, because this is our time, how somebody said, and this time we have to use it to come out of this mess, because it's just horrible. Thank you very much. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Yvonne.
From Dortmund, Gerald speaking again. I would like to encourage our participants for the last 20 minutes of our discussion just to think about concrete measures or recipes, how to fight racism, ideas we can exchange, because I think Mayor Brown gave us already a very important example, like inclusion of all minorities in the institutions, much more than today. And if we have more ideas like that, please let us discuss and exchange about that for the last round now.
William, do I see your hand up? William Duntio? Yeah, please unmute and you have the floor, yeah. Unmute on your screen, bottom left, yeah.
William Duntio again. Thank you very much for having me, giving me this opportunity to share my reflection with you. Please allow me first to come back to another question that you guys asked a few minutes before about the systematic racism. I would like to share my point of view of a system for foreign students, especially African students in Germany. Having a visa to study in Germany comes with a lot of measures, a lot of conditions, like affording a caution of more than 8,000 to 10,000 euro every year. And the African students are not allowed to get any scholarship help in Germany. Like there's a system here named BAföG. It's a support, governmental support for every student here. They can get it some money every month for rent and for their school fees. But all African students are not allowed to get this scholarship support here. I think it's very unfair, and it's a kind of systematic discrimination on our community. And we also I think the German law system is thinking about increasing, especially the school fees for the African students here right now in Germany. So the foreign student, the students which are not from the EU, and especially African students, will be paying like 1,000 euro school fees for every 6 months, but not the German student. I don't understand why are they going on this measure. So coming back to what we as members of the community we can do for against the racism. I'll come back to the citation of Walter Steinmeier, who said, we should all, it's more important to be anti-racist. That's why I and many of my community here have been thinking since a few weeks of starting a kind of anti-racist course for the kindergarten, for the children, and also for the youths. So giving a program, we want to start a programs with culture, with lessons, and other anti-racist, recipes, so that we will have conversations with children, with youths, and try to give them our experience, tell them our stories. We as people born in Africa, but also African born in Germany as in Europe, giving them sharing their story with them so that they will know more about, and not only the African students, I mean all the youth and the kids in Germany would like to share this experience with them. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
In your tricot, Borussia Dortmund, BVB. You are a soccer fan here in Dortmund. Do you have the feeling that you are
yes, of course,
a group of the soccer fans?
Yes, I'm sorry, I have to charge my phone. Yes, I'm a very big fan of Borussia Dortmund.
Yeah, and you are accepted in the community of the other fans?
I think he needed to charge his phone. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, he has lost us.
Yeah. I have another question. You know, as a white person, I often ask myself, so how do I start the conversation without being offensive? You know, we talk about being anti-racist, and, you know, what are the steps? You know, how do you define that? And what can be done to get there? Does anybody have any suggestions?
Here, the Rosalyn.
So let me try. For example, can you hear me?
Just a second. Ron was just about to speak. Yeah.
I actually think, you know, today's panel discussion is a great way. I think you have a diversified group who have different backgrounds and perspectives, and just leading that discussion, facilitating those discussions. I think we won't get to a conclusion unless we're all here working together and addressing the elephants in the room. And so I think, to answer your question, today's panel discussion is a great example of ways that we can start to combat racism, not just here, but globally. And so, you know, being able to come up with solutions as a group, and really work towards those, find a way that we can work towards those, that's key to, I believe, ending racism.
And Rosalyn now?
Okay. I think to talk a bit about your feeling. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good, good. Okay. Now, it's a cultural thing, you know, not to be offensive when you talk to somebody. For example, I walk on the street. That was about 10 years ago. A German came to me and said, "Hey, where are you from?" I said, "I'm from Africa." "How did you come here?" I said, "Okay, I swam." So you see, not being offensive or trying not to be a racist or feeling bad when you're talking to somebody. I don't know. One just have to be careful. Even amongst us Africans, it's quite diverse thing, you know. There are things I will tell a Nigerian bloke and he will laugh or she will laugh away. And I would say the same to a Cameroonian or a Ghanaian, and they will be offended. So there's no recipe for that.
Crystal, were you next?
I don't mind.
Yes,
being next.
yes, go ahead, and then Yeboah.
I think that what you just did was a good start, is saying that you'd like to be involved in this conversation, and how do you do so without being offensive? I think a lot of times that privilege allows people to feel like they're coming into a conversation and they know everything. And I think when you ask, how would you like to engage, is a wonderful first step. And it's also significant showing that you want to be a part of a hard conversation. The part about anti-racism, it's not enough. And I'll give you a quick example. On Facebook, this older white man engaged me in a very insulting way. And I had a friend who was a very insulting and racist way. And I had a friend who inboxed me and said, you know, that was horrible that he did that. And I was in the emotional moment, but I said, you know, you should have said on that comment or on that thread publicly that the way he approached me and the way he engaged with me was racist. No longer can we stand for people who really are supportive of this movement to be secretive and say things in the inbox. They've got to stand up and be very public about their support and very public about their position. And that's hard for some people, but that's what's needed right now. I no longer want private messages of support. I need something publicly stated.
Thank you very much. And I think it's a very American thing to maybe back down and try not to offend and be over nice and you know, the superficial conversations where we're not really getting beyond the icing and not getting to the cake. You know, we never get to take a bite because that icing is just frozen solid on there. Yes, thank you very much. Yeboah?
Yeah, the question I want to give back this question to you. When you meet a white fellow that you want to discuss something with, how do you start? You just start normally, just very natural. So, but if you meet somebody black, then you start, oh, where are you coming from? What are you doing here? When are you going back? Then I tell you, I'm coming from Ratingen. You say, no, I don't mean Ratingen. I mean where you're coming from in Africa. When are you going back? What are you doing here? Those questions, one after the other, it breaks everything already down. So I just go on the offensive. Now I think, okay, what does he want from me? So now whatever you say doesn't go in anymore. So just be natural. Hi, I'm Brown, I'm George. What's your name? So just be nice. If the person sees how it depends on how you start the conversation. If I realize you are coming too close, too fast, even you, a black person, you block because you actually say, what is all this mess about? So it's just something natural. Just being natural, go to somebody, hello, how are you? I'm fine, this is my name. What is your name? Do you feel like talking to me? If the person tells you no, then you look for your way and go away. But if you really want, then you can look for another means, but being polite. Just, that's all. There's no magic in it. But when you come, you start asking 1,000 questions, and all these questions is always about, when are you going back? What are you doing here? What type of job are you doing? Are you cleaning somewhere? That's what they used to ask most of the time. So it looks like we have cleaner job on the face gum somewhere. It's wrong. Just be natural. You get to the person, present yourself like normal talking. Everything will go. It will take its way. That's just natural. I don't know how you present yourself to somebody when you meet somebody. I don't know. So I think just be natural will be better. Thank you.
Thank you, Yeboah. And you know, between Yeboah and Crystal, I'm thinking for a t-shirt idea, maybe you know, right across the front, keeping it nice and real would be a good seller. And Dr. Conway-Turner, did you have your hand up?
I did. I wanted to both reinforce the comments that were just made. I think honesty is really important in the discussion. But I would add one other element to it that I think is really important for our white allies who really want to be a part of moving us to an anti-racist society. And that is that you have to really speak truth to systemic and institutional racism. There's so many times that people of color have conversations and someone says, no, that's not really systemic. And then they want to give you the example, the one person that they knew that was able to break out of whatever. And I think that allies have to be looking and understanding systemic racism and saying what it is to their colleagues when they're talking with you. And so that you don't just let it lie there, well, okay, I guess it's not, but to say, you know, well, let's explore that. And let's look at the evidence that suggests that this is really an institutional problem and not the one case breaks the notion that something racist is actually happening and has happened. And I would add that to the discussion as well.
Great, thank you very much, Dr. Conway-Turner. Do we have anybody else who would like to bring up another question? Mr. Matuke?
Yeah, I just want to add a bit to what the speakers have just said. I think I agreed with all of their points, but you asked a very pertinent question: what could you do to not to be racist or to encourage this cross-cultural communication? I think what is important is for you to look also the circle in which you live in, the circle in which you are living in, and see how you can open it to other communities, how it should be interculturally opened. For instance, if you are a journalist, you have to look at your circle and ask, why don't you have some Chinese guys or some African guys working with you within that panel? If you ask those such questions, you are outspoken and you are against racism in a way, and this justifies also the need for us to have a diverse community, in not just the community, but within the circle in which we navigate. So I think it starts from home. It's just like in your home, you have to be open for other cultures and other ideas.
Thank you.
I suggest then that we ask Olaf Sundermeyer once again in the end, because he talked about journalists also and media, we heard it sometimes, and Olaf Sundermeyer is a journalist, but also a researcher in the field of the right extremism. And what concerns me very much is that we have a group of people who kill on purpose people of color, like the NSU, National Socialist Underground in Germany. We had this group, or the killing of Walter Lübcke in Germany, who was the district governor in Germany, who had outspoken for refugees in his area. So, and he was killed for that. I mean, we have a real criminal scene also, and we have to prosecute that much more than we have done so far.
On the end, I didn't get the question, Gerald.
I have a problem with the microphone or with my English. I don't know.
Okay, no, it's not the English. It's the microphone.
So
you talked about Walter Lübcke and the right-wing groups. Hmm?
Yeah, the core of my question is, do we need to prosecute more this kind of real criminal, extreme, righteous scene, which is willing to kill others?
Okay, thank you. I got it now, Gerald. Yes, we have to do it much more consequent than we did in the past. But my impression is that we are right in the process of following these, I call them these hate crimes much more consequent than they did it in the past. One part of it is you quoted the case of Walter Lübcke, a regional politician from Hessen, a conservative politician that is the first politician killed by right-wing terrorists after 1945, after the end of the war. Since this incident, actually, the German state in general is following right-wing extremism and hate crimes much more consequently than they did in the past, from my impression, because they killed one of them. You know, usually right-wing terrorists, if you look at Dortmund, where you had this case of Mehmet Kubaschik on Malinkordstraße, this guy with a Kurdish background that run a kiosk there on Malinkordstraße was killed by right-wing terrorists, and for a lot of years people didn't care about it because still in German society certain people they will given a higher value than others, and this is that is the key of the problem. The violence, the hate crimes, and the right-wing terrorists is a symptom. The major problem is the racism, that Germany is still a divided society between us and them. And that is the main problem. So I would say that actually racism is the major problem, and the solution for that is not only can't be found by police or prosecutors alone. It has to be found by society in general. And on the end, we will always come to the point of diversity. Kevin Matuke asked, look in your only surroundment. I work in the public television, like you did, Gerald, for a lot of years. And my colleagues are, I would say, almost 100% white. They're white people. And the question is, why is it so? Diversity is a problem, not only in journalism, it's a problem in the police. The Berlin police, for example, has people with a migration background for 1/3 of police officers in Berlin, which is a lot for German meanings. I was in Cottbus, the far more eastern city in Germany, last Friday. There the police has people with migration background 0%, and that's the problem. So like the mayor of Buffalo just quoted, that people with a multicultural background should be more part of the public life, of the political life, of the bureaucracy, and that is part of the solution to fight racism. On the end, right-wing violence and right-wing terror is only a symptom of social racism in general. So it can't be solved only by police and prosecutors forces only.
Thank you, Olaf. Dan, you have other hands?
Do I have any other hands or questions currently, maybe from either from Buffalonians or perhaps our German friends? They did talk about demonstrations being held in out of solidarity with the United States, given the situation, the murder of George Floyd. Maybe we as Buffalonians can talk about the experience that we've had here with protests. Some of them have turned violent. What have you witnessed out there, and what are you feeling? Ron?
So being able during this time to personally do a 100-man march, myself, I led that with a couple of other colleagues. It consisted of 100 Black men in suits, and what we did was we marched from City Hall to Michigan Baptist Church. There was an African-American archway, heritage archway corridor that was built not too long ago. And so we stood under there and we listed legislative agendas to end police brutality. The experience, it was so unreal. I think the energy there, you had to really be there to see it. It was a combination of it was a combination of men of African descent from all different backgrounds. I think over history that has taught us that through the movement of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Noble Drew Ali and Marcus Garvey, that African of same descent were not able to come together. And that has always been the narrative. But on this day, we were able to march in solidarity. We had Muslims, we had Christians of all denominations, we have Moors from the Science Temple. We just had Black African men of descent from different regions, and it was a great feeling to be able to stand in unity and in peace and be able to list solutions to combat just one area, which is police brutality. You know, that is, to me, I feel like that is just a part of the spectrum. You have to look at the sheriff department because the police are local, the sheriff is a county level, and then you have to look at the criminal justice system. I feel like it is a three-tier system that is oppressing urban and minority communities here in Buffalo specifically. And so it was a great opportunity for us to stand in solidarity and peace and be able to list solutions, not only for the police to hear, so that the mayor can actually work with us moving forward to create change in those different areas. And he has been super willing to meet with all of us and now push towards the proper legislation and the reform in the legislation to be able to incorporate and include those that it might have left out with the language.
Ron, I can add from Germany maybe other encouraging examples. As Kevin Matuke mentioned already, we had more than 5,000 people also demonstrating in Dortmund against the police brutality in America, in this case. But I was at that time in Italy, in Viterbo, a little city north of Rome, and even there, hundreds of people had gathered at the Piazza del Plebiscito, the Piazza della Repubblica, on the main place in the city, and demonstrated also there at the same day. And I think these are two examples of many, many hundred cities all over Europe who stand together. And I mean, that is encouraging that we all stand up all over, and that is maybe the beginning for a change. And at the end of our discussion, I want to try to come to a kind of conclusion after all what I've heard. We have heard about it. It's very important that the narration has to change. The consciousness of the history must change, but also the inclusion of minorities in all institutions is important. And of course, the active commitment of everybody of us on the street, job, in the subway or train, and to speak loud and clear against racism, not only not to hear racism, but out loud and clear against. I think that is my impression, and if I have forgotten something important, please feel free to add it.
And Ron, are you allowed to elaborate on details regarding the legislation you're working on to end police brutality?
Yes, definitely. And so what we did was we ended up polling 125 African-American men or of African descent. And we came up with a list of 33. And so I'll kind of go through a few of them here with you all. Police tactic reform. That was something we did not want to have any police officers in the city of Buffalo have militarized weapons. We do not want that to be a part of any unit in the city of Buffalo, or any police force or any SWAT force, they cannot use militarized weapons. A mandatory cultural sensitivity training. And so we pointed out some key subjects here, which was communication, African-American history, and how it would be set up is like a 3-hour course as a form of punishment for internal affairs investigation. And they have to have positive community involvement with youth. One of the biggest topics here in Buffalo is body cam regulation. And so we wanted to be specific with that if the sound of the camera is off for any reason, it will result in suspension of officers. And then the cloud that recorded the body cams are regulated by a third party outside of the police force, where community representation can also be involved. When we're talking about the hiring of these police officers, we're talking about background checks and letter of recommendations. And the focal point is abuse of authority in any way, or any mental illnesses or racial past comments or statements. They would not be able to be a police officer. Another one, we had a de-escalation reform, imposing fines and suspensions for not using proper de-escalation training learned in the academy. One of the biggest ones, and this is majority of the men who took this poll, a creation of an oversight committee, a strong police civilian review board with subpoena power. And so they would be able to discipline with a zero tolerance policy that has no affiliation with police, who will review any claims of excessive force. And so I want to see what else do we have. We also have a working partnership between community leaders, block clubs, and police departments. So here in Buffalo, we already started an initiative called Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. And it was a block grant. And it allowed police to work with community organizations to create safer environments in urban communities. I think that there needs to be an increase in funding to that. I actually wrote the grant last year and won it on behalf of an organization. I'm on a block club, and they were only awarded $1,000. You're asking for us to create change, and so there needs to be an increase to that budget, and then a reappropriation of some of the funds from the police budget to these communities that have a focal point on, again, education, because there's a lot of miseducation, genealogy, financial literacy, and so that there can be a understanding and a growth of how to conduct and control a community in regards to equity in that area, and being able to leverage that when you're talking about banking and you're talking about building and sustaining wealth. And so these were, the last one was a separate town hall meeting with the president of the police union and the sheriff union and the prison union. And so the mayor can only do but so much. The real change has to take place within the unions. And so we were really pushing for a conversation in these unions, because there is no inclusion and there is no diversity. Every individual on the Buffalo Police Union are white males. That is a problem, and that needs to be addressed, and that needs to be changed so that there can be a diverse front and conversation taking place behind the scenes to make sure that cops are being held to the proper standards here. We talked about a mandatory drug testing reform, 60-day drug testing policy. We talked about mental health evaluations. There is no data accumulation taking place in the Police Oversight Committee in Buffalo, New York right now. There's nothing that can tell you how many arrests. There's nothing that can tell you, was there a mental illness that took in place? You can't even look at the internal affairs and see how many strikes officers have. All of this needs to be made public knowledge. And these are all things that we not only conveyed in front of the press, we conveyed to the mayor. And he has allowed us to have a seat in this reform process at the table to be able to make sure that a lot of these voices, again, these are voiceless individuals, but we're coming together and we're organizing and we're speaking as one unit, which is allowing a lot of things here. Again, it heightens the discussion during this time. And it's sad that it's taking a global health pandemic to now address social injustices, specifically here in Buffalo, but in the United States. And so it's like, this is the best time, and I'm grateful again for you guys allowing me to come and speak on this panel and express some of those reforms that we've pushed across the city of Buffalo, and also given to the Common Council as well.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron. It sounds like a lot of work being done in transparency also that may be translated to help the community avoid systematic racism. So that's wonderful to hear that you're initiating that, and thank you. And Klaus, did I see your hand?
Yes, Dan, that was my hand. Last but not least, I would like to remember on a German word, a poem. German, it's called Der Fisch beginnt am Kopf zu stinken.
Klaus, we can barely hear you.
Ganz nah dran halten. Also,
Ja, genau.
I would like to remember on the German word, the German poem. In German, it's called Der Fisch beginnt am Kopf zu stinken. In English, the fish begins to smell at the head. And if a president is going to be the biggest and greatest supporter of racists, please do not wonder that these people will succeed. And what we need is a better understanding in the sense of humanity and tolerance, but not racism. And it's really difficult to fight against such a movement in the society if the first man, the first president is being on the side of the racist.
Okay, that's a problem only the Americans can solve in November, and we are all curious to see what's going to happen. But I think
we have one more hand.
Hello, is there? Oh, I see still many hands coming up. Huh?
We have one hand. If we could just get that, and then we'll conclude. Is that okay, Gerald?
Yes, fine.
Great, thank you, Brenda.
Hi. Yes. When you had asked about the riots, I wasn't able. I didn't participate in the riots that were not the riots, the marches that were going on during this time. But I just wanted to give you a brief history. I'm a marcher from way back. I used to belong to the Buffalo chapter of the Black Panther Party, in which I still have 2 of the original papers that I sold back then. So I used to march quite a lot back during that time for different issues on African American rights, college school rights, the Vietnam War, and in which I'm a friend of Bruce Byars, who was one of Buffalo's famous African. He was the famous persons that went to Canada, because he did not want to participate in the war. And I just wanted to show you the paper. I don't know if you can still see. Can you see it? I don't see. Can you see the paper?
Your screen is off.
Your
video is off. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I have to show it one day. Yeah, I still possess 2 of the 2 of the Black Panther newspapers that I sold back then. However, I wanted to also say that police, the things with the police was also prevalent during the 60s. There was a big influx of police brutality up here in Buffalo. I don't know how many people remember that, but they were doing basically almost the same thing before it was before Martin Luther King passed away. They were brutalizing and arresting people for no reason and beating them up when they get when they get into lockup. And Buffalo had to come forth for that. And then after a while, it died down. It sort of died down. So I just wanted to just let you know that seemed, when it happened again this time, it seemed like it like circled right back around with the police brutalizing prisoners for no reason. And I just wanted to share that with you. And thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this panel. And I hope I've learned a lot listening to everybody, and I hope that you've also learned something from me. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Brenda. I also heard that it was predicted during the civil rights movement in the 60s that it would come full circle again, and apparently it has. I would like to ask Gerald if you have any final words before we conclude.
No, I think we should conclude now. We had a very worthwhile and interesting discussion and a very good exchange, even if we had sometimes difficulties to technical difficulties to understand each other, but more or less it worked fine. I have to thank Dan a lot, because this panel was his idea from Buffalo, and he has prepared it in a very good way. And I'm also grateful to Rosalyn Dressman here, because she hosted the location here, the Africa House, which had been almost been closed, if not the council of the city of Dortmund had given her recently some financial subsidies to overcome a financial crisis. In a difficult time we all are, with a pandemic, with a coronavirus and a different kind of life, it is still, in my eyes, the worst plague and the worst disease. Racism and hate speech and discrimination, even more than a virus, can attack us. This virus is already serious, but we have discussed the oldest and worst plague of mankind for 2 hours today between Buffalo and Dortmund over the Atlantic. Thank you very much to all participants and all who contributed.
Yes, thank you very much to Gerald on the moderating side in Dortmund and the Auslandsgesellschaft, especially Martina Plum and Matthias Mertes, who have cooperated with us this time to get everything going. We have no vaccination for the disease of racism, but thank you very much, panelists, for sharing your voices. It's very much appreciated. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to email me. You do have my email addresses, but we sincerely appreciate your courage coming today, and we hope to spread the word. So thank you very much to everybody, and have a great week.